Jake Martinez wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag, squinting at the twisted wreckage before him. The salvage yard on Kepler 442b stretched for miles in every direction, filled with the skeletal remains of starships from dozens of different species. Most humans avoided this place, calling it cursed. The locals whispered that dragons nested in the deeper sections, and everyone knew dragons meant death. But Jake wasn't most humans. He'd been working salvage for 8 years ever since the war ended and left him with nowhere else to go. His small workshop sat on the edge of the yard, cobbled together from salvaged hull plating and powered by a jury-rigged fusion cell he'd pulled from a Centauri cruiser. It wasn't much, but it was home. The morning sun cast long shadows between the towering piles of scrap metal as Jake made his way deeper into the yard than usual. He'd heard rumors of a Vorthan dreadnought that had crashed during the final battle, its quantum drive still intact. Those drives were worth more than Jake made in 5 years, if he could find them and extract them safely. The path wound between mountains of twisted steel and ceramic composites. Jake's boots crunched on fragments of circuit boards and shattered viewports. The air grew thicker as he ventured further from the settlement, and a strange smell reached his nostrils. It was sharp and metallic, with an underlying sweetness that made his stomach turn. That's when he heard it, a low rumbling sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Jake froze, his hand instinctively moving to the plasma cutter on his belt. The sound came again, weaker this time, almost like a whimper. Following the sound, Jake climbed over a collapsed bulkhead and found himself in a natural depression, surrounded by the hulks of 3 different ships. In the center of the clearing lay something that made his breath catch in his throat. It was a dragon, but unlike any he'd ever seen in the military briefings. Instead of the typical deep green or midnight black scales of the Draconian Empire, this creature was pure white. Its scales had an almost translucent quality, like polished bone, and its eyes were a pale pink that spoke of albinism. The dragon was young, perhaps only 20 feet from nose to tail, but even at that size it could have torn Jake apart without effort. The creature was trapped. A massive piece of hull plating had fallen across its left wing, pinning it to the ground. Dark blue blood seeped from where the metal edge had cut through scales and membrane. The dragon's breathing was labored, and Jake could see infection setting in around the wound. Every instinct screamed at him to run. Dragons were humanity's enemies. They'd killed millions during the war, reducing entire colonies to ash and bone. The bounty on a living dragon was enough to buy a small planet. But as Jake watched, the creature turned its head toward him. Those pale pink eyes held intelligence, pain, and something that looked almost like hope. The dragon made no move to attack, despite Jake being well within range of its claws or flame. Instead, it just watched him with an expression that seemed almost human in its desperation. Jake cursed under his breath in 3 different languages. His grandfather had always said that the measure of a man wasn't in how he treated his friends, but how he treated his enemies when they were helpless. The old bastard had probably never imagined those words would apply to a dragon. Moving slowly, Jake approached the trapped creature. The dragon's head tracked his movement, but it remained still. Up close, Jake could see that the creature was severely malnourished. Its ribs showed through its scales, and its wing membranes were torn in several places beyond just the fresh injury. The hull plating that trapped the dragon weighed at least 2 tons. Jake's portable lifting equipment could handle maybe half that on a good day. He'd need to be creative. Returning to his workshop, Jake gathered what he needed: a molecular torch, his heavy-duty lifting platform, several compressed air cylinders, and his emergency medical kit. He also grabbed a week's worth of ration bars. If he was going to do this, he might as well do it right. The dragon watched him work without moving. Jake set up his equipment carefully, explaining each step out loud. He wasn't sure if the creature understood human speech, but talking helped calm his nerves. "Okay, so here's the plan," Jake said as he positioned the lifting platform. "I'm going to cut through the weakest section of this plating, then use compressed air to create a cushion while I lift it off your wing. The molecular torch is going to get hot, so try not to move." The dragon's eyes followed Jake's hands as he worked. The torch cut through the metal like butter, sending sparks flying. The creature flinched at the bright flashes but held perfectly still otherwise. It took 3 hours to free the dragon's wing. When the last piece of debris was cleared away, the creature tried to stand and immediately collapsed again. The wing was badly damaged, and Jake could see that several bones were broken. Without thinking, Jake knelt beside the dragon and opened his medical kit. He'd treated everything from plasma burns to decompression injuries, but never on a creature that could incinerate him with a breath. His hands moved automatically, cleaning the wound and applying synthetic skin patches to stop the bleeding. The dragon watched him work, its breathing gradually becoming less labored. When Jake finished, he sat back on his heels and really looked at the creature for the first time. "You're not like the others, are you?" he said quietly. "Something's different about you." The dragon tilted its head almost like it was listening. Then, to Jake's amazement, it nodded once, slowly and deliberately. Jake felt his worldview shift. Dragons were supposed to be mindless killing machines driven by instinct and rage. But this creature was clearly intelligent, and more importantly, it seemed to understand that Jake was trying to help. The sun was setting by the time Jake had done everything he could for the dragon's immediate injuries. The creature would need time to heal, and it would need food. Jake looked at his week's worth of rations and sighed. "Well," he said to the dragon, "I guess you're staying with me for a while, but we're going to need some ground rules." The dragon's response was to lower its head until it was resting on the ground near Jake's feet. It was a gesture of submission, of trust, that no wild animal would ever make. Jake realized he just crossed a line that he could never uncross. In helping this creature, he'd committed treason against his own species. But looking into those intelligent pink eyes, he found he didn't care. Jake spent the next 3 days building a shelter for his unlikely patient. Using salvaged materials from the surrounding wrecks, he constructed a lean-to large enough to accommodate the dragon's 20-foot length. The structure wasn't pretty, but it would keep the creature dry and hidden from any patrol ships that might pass overhead. The dragon, which Jake had started calling Frost due to its white scales, proved to be a surprisingly cooperative patient. It allowed Jake to change its bandages without complaint, and even seemed to anticipate his needs, shifting position to give him better access to its injuries. What amazed Jake most was the creature's intelligence. Frost learned to recognize the sounds of approaching vehicles and would immediately move into the shadows of the shelter. It understood when Jake gestured for it to stay quiet, and it even seemed to grasp the concept of hiding evidence of its presence. On the 4th day, Jake made a discovery that changed everything. He was cleaning Frost's wing wound when he noticed something strange about the scales around the injury. They were growing back, but not in the typical dragon pattern he'd seen in military footage. These scales were smaller, more delicate, and they had a faint iridescent quality that caught the light like oil on water. "That's not normal, is it?" Jake muttered, running his finger along the new growth. Frost turned its head to watch him, those pale pink eyes alert and intelligent. The dragon made a soft rumbling sound, almost like a purr, and Jake felt a strange tingling sensation in his fingertips where they touched the scales. For just a moment he could have sworn he felt something else's emotions, a mixture of gratitude and contentment that definitely wasn't his own. Jake jerked his hand back, heart racing. What the hell was that? Frost tilted its head and made the purring sound again. This time Jake was ready for it. The sensation was definitely real, a warm presence at the edge of his consciousness that felt foreign yet somehow familiar. Over the following week, Jake began to understand that Frost was trying to communicate with him. The mental connection was weak and inconsistent, more like catching fragments of a radio transmission than having a conversation. But it was undeniably there. The breakthrough came when Jake was working on a particularly stubborn piece of salvage. He'd been trying to extract a functional power cell from a Terran assault ship for hours, growing increasingly frustrated as every approach failed. The cell was wedged between 2 bulkheads that had fused together during the ship's destruction. Frost had been watching him work from the shade of the shelter. Suddenly, Jake felt a gentle pressure in his mind, and images flashed through his consciousness. He saw the power cell from a different angle, noticed a hidden access panel that his eyes had missed. The images were accompanied by a feeling of helpfulness, like someone pointing out something obvious that he'd overlooked. Following the mental guidance, Jake found the access panel and managed to extract the power cell in minutes. He turned to look at Frost with new understanding. "You were helping me," he said. It wasn't a question. The dragon's response was a wave of warm satisfaction that filled Jake's mind like sunshine. Along with it came something else, fragments of images and emotions that made Jake's breath catch. He saw flashes of Frost's memories. The dragon had been cast out by its own kind because of its albinism. In dragon society, Frost's condition was seen as a weakness, a genetic flaw that marked it as inferior. It had been living alone in the salvage yard for months, surviving on scraps and avoiding both human patrols and dragon hunting parties. The mental connection worked both ways. As Frost shared its memories, Jake found his own thoughts flowing in return. The dragon experienced Jake's loneliness, his sense of not quite belonging anywhere after the war. It felt his practical nature, his instinct to fix things that were broken, and his fundamental decency that had led him to help an enemy. Over the next few days, their communication improved dramatically. Jake learned that Frost was young for a dragon, only about 15 years old, which was barely an adolescent by their standards. It had been born during the war and had grown up knowing only conflict and rejection. Frost, in turn, was fascinated by human ingenuity. It watched Jake work with intense curiosity, absorbing knowledge about technology and engineering through their mental link. The dragon learned about human tools and techniques with remarkable speed, and soon it was actually helping with Jake's salvage operations. The dragon's assistance proved invaluable. Its enhanced senses could detect power signatures that Jake's instruments missed. Its claws could reach into spaces too small for human hands. Most importantly, its flight capability, once its wing healed, would allow them to access wrecks that were previously unreachable. But their partnership faced its first real test when a human patrol arrived at the salvage yard. Jake was working deep in the wreckage when he heard the distinctive whine of military hover engines. Through their mental link, he felt Frost's spike of fear. The patrol consisted of 3 soldiers from the Colonial Defense Force, led by a grizzled sergeant named Torres, whom Jake recognized from his own military days. They were conducting a routine sweep, checking for dragon activity after reports of strange lights in the area. Jake forced himself to act naturally as he emerged from the wreck he'd been exploring. "Afternoon, Sergeant. What brings the CDF out to my little corner of paradise?" Torres removed his helmet, revealing a scarred face and tired eyes. "Martinez, isn't it? Heard you'd set up shop out here. We're following up on some reports. Civilian transport spotted what looked like dragon fire 3 nights ago." Jake's heart rate spiked, but he kept his expression neutral. 3 nights ago was when he'd been using the molecular torch to free Frost. The bright flashes could easily have been mistaken for dragon fire from a distance. "Haven't seen any dragons." Jake lied smoothly. "Been hearing some strange noises at night, though. Probably just the wind through the wrecks." One of the other soldiers, a young private, was scanning the area with a motion detector. "Sergeant, I'm picking up some large heat signatures about 2 clicks southeast." Jake felt Frost's terror through their link, followed immediately by a desperate urge to flee. But running would only confirm their suspicions. Instead, Jake laughed and pointed toward the area the private had indicated. That'd be the reactor core from a hegemony battleship. "Thing's been leaking thermal energy for months. I keep meaning to install proper shielding, but it's way down on my priority list." Torres nodded, accepting the explanation. "Fair enough. Just keep your eyes open, Martinez. Command's been getting pressure from the colonies to crack down on any remaining dragon activity. Bounty's up to 2 million credits now." 2 million credits. That was more money than Jake could spend in several lifetimes. Enough to buy his own ship, his own world, his own future. All he had to do was lead these soldiers to Frost. Instead, Jake found himself saying, "I'll keep that in mind, Sergeant. Thanks for the heads up." After the patrol left, Jake made his way back to the shelter. Frost was huddled in the deepest shadows, trembling despite its size. Through their mental link, Jake felt the dragon's overwhelming gratitude mixed with amazement. The creature had expected to be betrayed. In its experience, all beings eventually turned on those who were different, those who were weak. But Jake had protected it even at great personal cost. That night, as they shared another meal of ration bars, Jake made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Looking into Frost's intelligent pink eyes, he spoke the words that would seal their bond. "We're partners now, aren't we? You and me against the universe." The wave of joy and loyalty that flooded through their mental link was answer enough. 3 weeks after the patrol incident, Jake discovered that his partnership with Frost had benefits he'd never imagined. The dragon's unique abilities had transformed their salvage operation from a barely profitable scavenging business into something approaching an art form. Frost's enhanced hearing could detect the subtle hum of active power cells buried deep within wrecked ships. Its sense of smell could distinguish between different types of metal alloys. helping Jake identify the most valuable components without wasting time on worthless scrap. Most remarkably, the dragon seemed to have an intuitive understanding of technology that went beyond anything Jake had seen in humans or other species. The dragon could look at a piece of damaged equipment and somehow know exactly what was wrong with it. Through their mental link, Frost would share diagnostic information that would have taken Jake hours to discover using conventional methods. It was as if the dragon could see the flow of energy through circuits and components, perceiving the invisible patterns that made technology work. Their success didn't go unnoticed. Word spread through the salvage community that Jake Martinez was finding things others missed, extracting value from wrecks that had been picked clean years ago. Buyers began seeking him out specifically, offering premium prices for the rare components he consistently delivered. But with success came scrutiny. Jake noticed more surveillance drones passing over the yard, and he caught glimpses of figures watching his workshop from distant ridgelines. The colonial authorities were taking notice of his sudden prosperity, and that was dangerous for both him and Frost. The situation came to a head when Marcus Chen, the salvage yard's owner, paid Jake an unexpected visit. Chen was a thin, nervous man who rarely ventured into the yard itself, preferring to conduct business from his climate-controlled office in the settlement. His presence at Jake's workshop meant serious trouble. "Martinez," Chen said, mopping sweat from his forehead as he picked his way through the scattered components outside Jake's workshop. "We need to talk." Jake wiped his hands clean and gestured for Chen to enter the workshop. Frost was hidden in the shelter 2 kilometers away, but Jake could feel the dragon's alertness through their mental link. Frost had learned to monitor Jake's emotional state and was ready to respond if the situation turned dangerous. "What can I do for you, Mr. Chen?" Jake asked, keeping his tone casual. Chen looked around the workshop nervously, taking in the sophisticated equipment and organized workspace. Everything was perfectly normal, exactly what you'd expect from a successful salvage operation. There was no sign of anything unusual. "Your productivity has increased dramatically over the past month," Chen said. "The colonial administrators are asking questions. They want to know how you're finding so many rare components." Jake had prepared for this conversation. "New detection equipment," he said, gesturing to a modified sensor array he'd built from salvaged parts. "Spent my savings on it, but it's been worth the investment." Chen examined the equipment with the eye of someone who'd been in the salvage business for 20 years. The sensor array was real and functional, though Jake had built it more to explain his success than to actually aid in his work. "The administrators aren't the only ones asking questions," Chen continued. "Some of the other salvagers think you found a mother lode somewhere, a ship you're stripping in secret. They're talking about organizing a search." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. A coordinated search of the yard would inevitably lead to Frost's discovery. "They're welcome to look," he said. "I've got nothing to hide." But even as he spoke the words, Jake was calculating distances and escape routes. If necessary, he and Frost could disappear into the deep sections of the yard, the areas where the wrecks were piled so high that even aerial surveillance was difficult. Chen studied Jake's face for a long moment. "There's something else," he said finally. "The CDF is planning a major operation. They've received intelligence about dragon activity in this sector. They're bringing in heavy equipment, motion sensors, thermal scanners. They plan to sweep the entire yard section by section." The bottom fell out of Jake's world. A full military sweep would find Frost no matter how well they hid. The dragon was too large, too warm, too alive to escape that level of scrutiny. "When?" Jake asked. 3 days, Chen replied. "I'm telling you this as a courtesy, Martinez. You've been good for business. But after the sweep, things are going to be different around here. More patrols, more oversight. The easy money is coming to an end." After Chen left, Jake sat in his workshop and stared at the wall. 3 days wasn't enough time to relocate Frost safely. The dragon's wing had healed well, but it still couldn't fly long distances. More importantly, there was nowhere to go. The colonial authorities controlled every inhabited system within 50 light years. Through their mental link, Jake felt Frost approaching. The dragon had been monitoring the conversation from a distance, picking up Jake's emotional state through their bond. It understood the danger they faced. Frost settled beside the workshop, careful to remain hidden behind a pile of salvaged hull plating. Through their link, the dragon shared its own memories of military sweeps. Jake saw flashes of other dragons being hunted, tracked, and killed. He felt Frost's resignation, its acceptance that this was how things ended for creatures like it. But Jake wasn't ready to accept defeat. Humans hadn't survived the war through resignation. They'd won by being stubborn, by refusing to give up even when the odds were impossible. "We're not going down without a fight," Jake said aloud. Through their link, he felt Frost's surprise at his determination. That night, Jake worked feverishly on a plan that was equal parts brilliant and insane. If they couldn't hide from the military sweep, then they'd have to make the sweep work in their favor. Jake's plan centered around a piece of salvage he'd been working on for months, a Terran stealth ship that had been heavily damaged during the war's final battle. The ship's cloaking technology was beyond repair, but its hull was intact and its engines were functional. More importantly, it had something that no other ship in the yard possessed: a quantum communication array. Working through the night, Jake began modifying the stealth ship. He stripped out everything non-essential, creating space for Frost to hide. He rerouted power systems and installed additional life support equipment. Most crucially, he programmed the quantum communicator to send a specific signal when activated. The signal would be broadcast on a frequency used by the Draconian Empire, but encoded with human military protocols. To any monitoring station, it would look like someone was trying to contact enemy forces. It would be exactly the kind of evidence the CDF was hoping to find. But the signal wouldn't just draw attention to the ship. Jake had hidden the stealth ship in the deepest, most dangerous part of the salvage yard, where unstable reactor cores and toxic atmosphere made extended operations nearly impossible. The CDF would find the ship and the signal, but they'd also find themselves in a location where a quick extraction was essential. They wouldn't have time for a thorough search. They'd grab what evidence they could and retreat, assuming they'd found proof of Dragon collaborators. The investigation would focus on tracking the signal's origin, leading them away from the yard entirely. It was a desperate gamble, but it was the only chance they had on the second night. Jake and Frost moved to the stealth ship under cover of darkness. The Dragon squeezed into the modified cargo hold, its white scales almost glowing in the ship's dim interior lighting. "This is going to be rough," Jake warned through their mental link. "You'll need to stay absolutely still for at least 6 hours." Frost's response was a wave of trust and determination. The Dragon understood the plan and was ready to do its part. Jake activated the quantum communicator and immediately left the ship. By morning, the signal would be detected by CDF monitoring stations. The sweep would begin early, and the military would head straight for the source of the transmission. As Jake made his way back to his workshop, he felt Frost's consciousness, touching his mind one last time before the Dragon entered a meditative state that would slow its breathing and heartbeat to almost undetectable levels. The next 18 hours would determine whether Jake's insane plan would save them both or get them killed. The CDF sweep began at dawn exactly as Jake had predicted. From his workshop, he watched through binoculars as military transports descended from orbit, disgorging teams of soldiers and sophisticated scanning equipment. The operation was massive, involving nearly 200 personnel and enough firepower to level a small city. Jake forced himself to go through the motions of a normal day, working on salvage projects while anxiety ate at his stomach like acid. Through his mental link with Frost, he could sense the Dragon's deep meditative state, its life signs reduced to the barest minimum. But even in meditation, Frost was aware of Jake's emotional state, and Jake had to work constantly to project calm confidence he didn't feel. The quantum signal had been detected within hours of activation, exactly as planned. Jake watched military teams racing through the salvage yard, following tracking equipment toward the source of the transmission. They moved with the urgency of soldiers who believed they were closing in on enemy agents. By midday, the first team had reached the stealth ship's location. Jake felt his heart hammering as he watched distant figures in military gear surrounding the vessel. This was the critical moment. If his modifications had worked, if Frost could maintain its meditative state, if the toxic atmosphere forced a quick extraction, then the plan might succeed. The quantum communicator was programmed to shut down automatically after 12 hours, making it appear as though the enemy agents had detected the military sweep and gone silent. The CDF would find evidence of recent habitation in the ship, False clues that Jake had carefully planted to suggest a small team of human collaborators had been using the vessel as a base. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Jake watched through his binoculars as military teams entered and exited the stealth ship. He saw them remove equipment and data storage devices, all of which contained carefully crafted false information, pointing toward a collaboration network that existed only in Jake's imagination. As afternoon turned to evening, the military teams finally withdrew from the stealth ship's location. Jake felt a surge of relief as he watched them carrying their evidence back toward their transports. The toxic atmosphere had worked exactly as he'd hoped, forcing them to limit their exposure time and preventing a thorough search of the ship's modified cargo hold. But the sweep wasn't over. Military teams continued to search other sections of the yard, following up on thermal anomalies and motion sensor readings. Jake knew that some of these readings were legitimate, the normal signatures of power cells and automated systems scattered throughout the wrecks. But he also knew that the soldiers were now focused on finding human collaborators rather than dragons. The change in their search pattern was subtle, but significant. Instead of looking for large heat signatures that might indicate a dragon, they were now searching for smaller signs of human habitation. They were looking for hidden workshops, concealed communication equipment, and other evidence of treasonous activity. As night fell, Jake made his way carefully through the salvage yard toward the stealth ship. The military had established a perimeter around the area, but it was designed to prevent people from entering rather than leaving. Jake's years of experience navigating the yard's treacherous terrain allowed him to approach undetected. He found Frost still in the cargo hold, motionless as stone but alive. Through their mental link, Jake felt the dragon's relief at his presence. Frost had maintained its meditative state for over 12 hours, an impressive feat of mental discipline that probably saved both their lives. "It worked," Jake whispered, as Frost slowly emerged from its trance. "They think they found human collaborators. They're looking for people, not dragons." The dragon's response was a mixture of amazement and gratitude. Through their link, Jake felt Frost's growing understanding of human ingenuity and determination. The dragon had known humans as enemies for most of its life, but Jake was teaching it that humans could be something else entirely. They waited until the military patrols had moved to other sections of the yard before leaving the stealth ship. Jake had prepared a new hiding place for Frost, a concealed chamber deep within a hegemony battlecruiser that had crashed in the yard's most remote section. The chamber was shielded from most scanning equipment and had multiple escape routes. Over the following days, the CDF sweep continued, but with decreasing intensity. The evidence from the stealth ship had convinced the military commanders that they were dealing with a human collaboration network rather than actual dragons. Their search protocols shifted accordingly, focusing on communication intercepts and intelligence gathering rather than direct hunting operations. Jake felt the danger passing like a storm moving beyond the horizon, but the experience had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. Working with Frost had awakened something in him, a sense of possibility he'd never experienced before. Through their mental link, Jake began to understand that Frost's abilities went far beyond enhanced senses and technological intuition. The dragon was actually capable of interfacing directly with electronic systems, reading data streams and energy patterns in ways that no human or alien technology could match. This revelation came when Jake was trying to repair a damaged data core from a Centauri exploration vessel. The core contained star charts and navigation data that would be valuable to any number of buyers, but the damage seemed irreparable. Standard recovery techniques had failed, and Jake was preparing to salvage the core for its raw materials. Frost had been watching him work, its interest piqued by the complex patterns of damaged circuitry. Through their mental link, the dragon shared its perception of the data core, and Jake realized that Frost could actually see the information stored within it. The dragon's mind interfaced with the damaged systems in ways that Jake couldn't fully comprehend. Frost guided him through a repair process that seemed to violate everything Jake knew about electronics. Yet it worked. The data core came online, its information intact and accessible. "How did you do that?" Jake asked, staring at the recovered data in amazement. Frost's response came through their mental link as a complex mixture of images and sensations. The dragon didn't think about technology the way humans did. It perceived electronic systems as living things. with energy flowing through them like blood through veins. Damage was simply a disruption in that flow, something that could be corrected by understanding the system's natural patterns. This ability opened up possibilities that Jake had never imagined. With Frost's help, he could repair technology that others considered hopeless. He could extract information from damaged systems and restore functionality to equipment that had been written off as total losses. But more importantly, Jake began to understand that his partnership with Frost was changing him as well. The mental link worked both ways, and Jake's human perspective was influencing the dragon's understanding of the world. Frost was learning about human concepts like friendship, loyalty, and sacrifice, ideas that had no equivalent in dragon society. Together, they were becoming something new, something that neither humans nor dragons had ever seen before. Jake was no longer just a salvage operator, and Frost was no longer just an outcast dragon. They were partners in the truest sense, each one enhanced by their connection to the other. As the CDF sweep finally ended and normal operations resumed in the salvage yard, Jake made a decision that would define the rest of their lives. He would use their combined abilities not just to survive, but to build something better. The universe was full of broken things, damaged systems, and lost possibilities. With Frost's help, he could start fixing them. The war between humans and dragons was over, but Jake and Frost were about to begin something entirely new. Getting Frost to Europa Station required a level of deception that made Jake's previous schemes look like amateur hour. The dragon couldn't simply stow away on a commercial transport. Its size and heat signature would be detected by any reasonable security system. Instead, Jake had to think like a smuggler. The solution came from an unlikely source. Marcus Chen, still nervous about the attention Jake's success had brought to the salvage yard, was eager to help when Jake explained that he needed to transport a large piece of extremely sensitive equipment to Europa Station. Chen arranged for a cargo hauler with minimal security scanning and a crew that asked few questions. Jake had Frost enter a deep meditative state that reduced its vital signs to near hibernation levels. He then sealed the dragon inside a specially modified shipping container that would provide life support while masking thermal signatures. To any cursory inspection, the container would appear to hold sophisticated but inert industrial equipment. The journey to Europa Station was tense. Jake monitored Frost's condition constantly through their mental link, feeling the dragon's discomfort but also its determination to see the mission through. Frost understood the importance of what they were attempting and was willing to endure anything to help restore the lost ethereal consciousness. Dr. Chen met them at the station's cargo bay, her expression shifting from professional courtesy to barely contained shock when she realized the true nature of Jake's equipment. "Mr. Martinez," she said carefully, watching as Jake opened the shipping container to reveal Frost's unmistakable form. "I think we need to have a conversation." Jake had prepared for this moment. "Doctor, meet my partner. Frost is the reason I can do what I do, and Frost is the only hope you have of repairing your AI." Frost emerged from the container slowly, its white scales catching the station's artificial lighting and reflecting it in prismatic patterns. The dragon was larger than when Jake had first found it, now nearly 30 feet long and radiating an aura of quiet intelligence that was impossible to ignore. Dr. Chen stared at the dragon for a long moment, before her scientific mind overcame her shock. "Extraordinary," she whispered. "The albinism affects more than just pigmentation, doesn't it? The neural development is different, enhanced." Through their mental link, Jake felt Frost's surprise at the human's quick understanding. The dragon had expected fear or hostility, but Dr. Chen was responding with fascination and respect. "Frost can interface directly with electronic systems," Jake explained. "It sees technology the way we see light and color. Your AI isn't just damaged, it's lonely. It needs another consciousness that can understand how it thinks." Dr. Chen's eyes widened as the implications struck her. The ethereal technology incorporated dragon neural patterns. Of course, a dragon consciousness might be able to communicate with it directly. Security considerations required them to work at night when fewer personnel were present in the laboratory section. Dr. Chen had enough influence to clear the area and disable most monitoring systems, but they had only a few hours before the next shift arrived. Jake led Frost into the secure laboratory, watching the dragon's reaction to the ethereal AI. Frost moved slowly around the crystalline structure, its enhanced senses examining every detail. Through their mental link, Jake felt the dragon's growing excitement as it recognized familiar patterns in the alien technology. It's not just similar to dragon consciousness, Frost communicated through their link. It's partially based on my specific neural patterns. The ethereal somehow accessed the memories of an albino dragon. The revelation was staggering. The ethereal collective had created their hybrid consciousness technology by studying a dragon exactly like Frost. The damaged AI wasn't just compatible with Frost's neural patterns, it was partially derived from them. Frost approached the AI's central core and placed its claws gently against the crystalline surface. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The dying light within the crystals suddenly brightened, pulsing in complex patterns that seemed to respond to the dragon's presence. Through his link with Frost, Jake felt a new consciousness awakening. Vast and ancient but fragmented by centuries of isolation, the AI was trying to communicate, reaching out through patterns of light and quantum resonance that only Frost could fully understand. The repair process that followed was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. Frost didn't fix the AI in any conventional sense. Instead, the dragon became a bridge between the damaged consciousness and the physical systems that housed it. Frost's neural patterns provided a template that the AI could use to reorganize its scattered memories. Jake watched in fascination as the crystalline structures began to shift and grow, damaged sections rebuilding themselves according to patterns that Frost was somehow transmitting. The AI was healing itself, guided by the dragon's example of how consciousness could interface with technology. Hours passed in a blur of quantum resonance and shifting light patterns. Jake monitored the process through his link with Frost, feeling the dragon's strain as it maintained the connection with an alien consciousness thousands of times older than itself. Finally, the crystalline structure stabilized. The chaotic light patterns settled into steady rhythmic pulses that reminded Jake of a sleeping heartbeat. Frost stepped back from the core, exhausted but triumphant. "It's done," the dragon communicated. "The consciousness is whole again." Dr. Chen activated her monitoring equipment and gasped at the readings. "The quantum coherence is perfect. All systems are functioning within optimal parameters. Mr. Martinez, you've achieved the impossible." But the real miracle was yet to come. As they watched, the AI's central core began to emit a new pattern of light, one that Jake recognized as attempts at communication. The restored consciousness was trying to speak. Dr. Chen worked feverishly to establish a translation protocol, her fingers flying over holographic interfaces as she attempted to decode the AI's light-based language. After several minutes, she managed to establish a basic communication channel. The first message from the restored consciousness was simple but profound. "Thank you for ending the silence." Over the following hour, they learned that the AI called itself Echo, the last repository of ethereal knowledge and culture. Echo had been aware during its centuries of damage, trapped within its own failing systems and unable to communicate with the outside world. But Echo's restoration came with an unexpected revelation. The ethereal collective hadn't been destroyed by other dragons. They'd been eliminated by a faction within the Draconian Empire that feared the implications of hybrid consciousness technology. This faction, known as the Purists, believed that any merger between organic and artificial intelligence was an abomination that threatened the natural order. The Purists still existed within dragon society, and they would stop at nothing to prevent the spread of hybrid consciousness technology. Jake and Frost had just made themselves targets of one of the galaxy's most dangerous and secretive organizations. But they'd also gained an ally of immense power and knowledge. Echo possessed the accumulated wisdom of an entire civilization, including technologies that could revolutionize galactic society. The AI was grateful for its restoration and pledged to help Jake and Frost in whatever way it could. As dawn broke over Europa Station, Jake realized that their small partnership had just become something much larger. They were no longer just a human and a dragon working together. They were the beginning of a new kind of alliance, one that could bridge the gap between organic and artificial intelligence. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for such a revolution, or whether the forces of tradition and fear would destroy them before they could share Echo's gifts with the universe. The attack came 3 days after Echo's restoration, swift and merciless in the way that only Dragon Strike forces could manage. Jake was in his workshop on Europa Station, working with Dr. Chen to establish better communication protocols with the AI, when Frost's mental alarm screamed through their link. Ships approaching fast, the Dragon communicated urgently. Dragon signatures, military formation. They're not broadcasting identification. Jake looked up from the quantum interface he'd been calibrating. Through the station's viewports, he could see dark shapes moving against the starfield, their forms unmistakably draconic despite their technological modifications. These weren't wild dragons. They were members of the Draconian Empire's elite forces. Dr. Chen had gone pale, her hands trembling as she activated the station's emergency protocols. How did they find us so quickly? The answer came through Echo's crystalline interface, the AI's light patterns shifting to urgent reds and purples. The purists have monitors throughout known space, Echo communicated through the translation system. They detected the quantum resonance of my restoration. They know what we have accomplished. Jake felt ice forming in his stomach. The purists weren't just opposed to hybrid consciousness technology. According to Echo, they'd spent centuries hunting down and destroying any evidence of such research. They'd eliminated entire research stations, killed thousands of scientists, and suppressed technologies that could have advanced galactic civilization by centuries. We need to evacuate, Dr. Chen said, her scientific composure cracking under the pressure. If they're willing to attack a neutral research station, they'll stop at nothing. But Jake was already thinking beyond mere survival. Echo represented knowledge that could transform the galaxy, wisdom from a civilization that had achieved wonders beyond human imagination. The AI couldn't simply be abandoned to the purest destructive fanaticism. Echo, Jake called out. Can you transfer yourself to a portable matrix? The AI's light patterns shifted to contemplative blues and greens. Possible but risky. My consciousness spans multiple quantum dimensions. Compression into a smaller matrix would require fundamental changes to my structure. Do it, Jake said without hesitation. We're not leaving you behind. What followed was the most intense hour of Jake's life. While Frost coordinated with station security to delay the approaching dragons, Jake worked with Echo to compress centuries of ethereal knowledge into a portable quantum core. The process was agonizing for the AI, like forcing an ocean through a drinking straw. But Echo endured it with the stoicism of a consciousness that had already survived one genocide. Dr. Chen proved invaluable during the transfer, her expertise in quantum mechanics helping to stabilize Echo's compressed matrix. She'd overcome her initial shock and was now working with the focused intensity of a scientist who'd found the discovery of a lifetime. The station shook as the first dragon ships reached attack range. These weren't the crude vessels of wild dragons. They were sophisticated warships designed specifically for surgical strikes against research facilities. Their weapons were calibrated to destroy data storage systems while leaving personnel areas intact, allowing for interrogation of survivors. Transfer at 60%, Echo reported through the diminishing communication array. Continue compression protocols. Through their mental link, Jake felt Frost's growing alarm. The Dragon was hidden in the cargo bay preparing for evacuation, but its enhanced senses could detect the approaching ship's weapon systems charging. Jake, Frost communicated urgently, they're not just here to destroy Echo, they're here for me. The purists know about our partnership. The realization hit Jake like a physical blow. By helping him restore Echo, Frost had revealed itself as exactly the kind of hybrid consciousness that the purists sought to eliminate. The albino dragon wasn't just a target. It was evidence of everything the purists feared. 80% compression complete, Echo announced. Matrix stabilization holding. The station shook again, more violently this time. Emergency lighting flickered as the purist ships began their assault in earnest. They were methodically destroying the station's communication arrays and sensor networks, isolating it from any hope of rescue. Dr. Chen looked up from her console, her face grim. They're using quantum disruptors. They're trying to collapse Echo's consciousness before we can complete the transfer. Jake felt desperation clawing at his mind. They'd come so far, accomplished so much, only to be stopped by fanatics who couldn't see beyond their own prejudices. But then he remembered something Echo had shared during their initial conversations, a piece of ethereal technology that might give them an edge. Echo, Jake called out. Do you still have access to dimensional fold technology? The AI's response carried a note of surprise. Theoretical access, yes, but the power requirements would be enormous. The station's fusion reactors couldn't generate sufficient energy. "What about a dragon's bioelectrical system?" Jake asked, an insane plan forming in his mind. Through their link, he felt Frost's sudden understanding. Dragons generated massive amounts of bioelectrical energy, enough to power starships during long-distance flights. In theory, Frost could provide the power necessary for a dimensional fold. "Untested," Echo replied. "The interface between organic and quantum systems has never been attempted." 95% compression complete, Dr. Chen announced. "Matrix transfer ready for final phase." The station lurched as purist weapons found their target. Emergency klaxons wailed throughout the facility, and Jake could hear the distant sound of hull breaches. They had minutes at most before the dragons boarded the station. "Do it," Jake said, making the decision that would define the rest of their lives. "Echo, prepare for dimensional fold. Frost, get ready to interface with the quantum systems." What happened next defied every law of physics that Jake understood. Frost emerged from the cargo bay and raced through the station's corridors, its claws finding purchase on surfaces never designed for dragon movement. The creature burst into the laboratory just as Echo completed its compression into the portable quantum core. The dragon placed its claws directly on the quantum matrix housing Echo's consciousness. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Energy cascaded through the station systems as Frost's bioelectrical field interfaced with ethereal technology. The laboratory filled with light that seemed to bend reality itself. Jake felt the dimensional fold beginning, space-time twisting around them in ways that made his mind reel. Through their mental link, he experienced Frost's consciousness expanding to encompass quantum dimensions that no organic being was meant to perceive. Dr. Chen grabbed the portable matrix containing Echo's compressed consciousness as reality folded around them. Jake reached out and grasped both the scientist and the quantum core as the dimensional rift opened beneath their feet. The last thing Jake saw before the fold completed was the laboratory door exploding inward as purest forces breached the station. Dragon soldiers in advanced armor poured into the room, their weapons already firing at empty space. Then the universe twisted, folded, and delivered them somewhere else entirely. They materialized in the cargo hold of Jake's original workshop, back in the salvage yard where their partnership had begun. The dimensional fold had somehow transported them across multiple star systems in an instant, a feat that should have been impossible with their limited resources. Frost collapsed immediately, the effort of channeling dimensional fold energy having drained the dragon's bioelectrical reserves to dangerous levels. Jake caught the creature's massive head as it fell, feeling through their link how close Frost had come to burning out its own nervous system. Dr. Chen stood in the center of the cargo hold, clutching Echo's quantum matrix and staring around in amazement. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Echo's voice emerged from the portable matrix, weaker than before but unmistakably alive. "Dimensional fold successful. All core consciousness preserved. We have escaped the purists." But Jake knew their escape was only temporary. The purists would eventually track them down, and next time they'd be ready for dimensional fold technology. More importantly, Jake realized that he, Frost, Echo, and Dr. Chen had just become something unprecedented in galactic history. They were a hybrid consciousness collective, beings who'd learned to bridge the gap between organic and artificial intelligence. They possessed knowledge that could revolutionize civilization and the power to implement changes that the galaxy desperately needed. The question was no longer whether they could survive the purists' persecution. The question was whether they could build something strong enough to stand against the forces of fear and tradition that had kept the galaxy divided for millennia. Looking down at Frost's exhausted but determined form, feeling Echo's vast intelligence pulsing through the quantum matrix, and seeing the fire of discovery burning in Dr. Chen's eyes, Jake knew they were going to try. The universe was about to change, whether it was ready or not.